please bear with me today. I also want to say thank you so much for being here. I am in Billings and it is currently 72 degrees and 4 o'clock on a Monday. And so being here is showing your dedication. And so I hope that this time is valuable for you and worth your time. And to that end, I want to say that if at any point you have a question, you would like to suggest something or share something that works for you, or if you have a challenge, so you've tried something and you're hitting a wall or you just don't know what else to do, I please, 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 I love questions. It helps me become a better presenter. It helps me to understand how to meet the needs better. Not sure why this is coming over here now. Um, and so please feel free to ask any questions that you might have along the way. Don't be afraid to stop me. So yeah, we'll get started here. I am Aimee Konzen. I'm the Professional Learning Manager. I have been at the Office of Public Instruction almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years next month, so that's crazy. And I get to work with the fine people in early literacy and help bring the best strategies to our teachers. And I'm a born and raised Montana girl, grew up in Billings, went to Billings Senior High, graduated from Missoula, and then came back and taught in Billings. I've also taught in New Zealand, taught middle school ELA, did a very brief stint in administration, and then found myself at the OPI. And so that's kind of my journey. My secret passion, though, that people are sort of surprised to learn about because I never really specialized in it, is assessment and truly being able to understand what kids know and what they can do, and then being able to diagnose the next step in their learning and really give them that right now instruction. Through that, I found that I'm a nerd and that I love standards and that it really gave me clear guidelines of what kids needed to be able to know and do. And yeah, it just really transformed my teaching. And so we'll talk more about that today, kind of as we go through the activities. But that's kind of what brought me to here. So I'm sort of like this closet assessment nerd. And I love to talk about it, and people are always like, wait, what? You like it? But when done and it gives you the right information, it just changes your classroom. I do have an agenda here posted, but I already changed it, so I forgot to change it on the agenda, I realized. But we're going to do the second activity first and the first activity second. And if you know anything about me, that sounds about right. But we'll start off on what is proficiency, what does it look like, how do we figure out what it is, and then we're going to dig right in and take a standard and kind of pull it apart and develop a proficiency scale, and then take that proficiency scale and talk about, well, what activities could I use to align to this to make sure that I'm offering questions that are at standard and then also questions that are a little below. So that 2.0 question that's part of the standard. And then what do I do with that 4.0 or that acceleration? And what does that look like in kindergarten, first and second grade? So that's kind of the plan for today. We'll see how far we get. It's a lot. It's a lot of information. And so again, please feel free if you have questions to stop me. I've actually hidden all your faces because I have a really hard time when I watch them. So you'll have to let me know if there is a question because I don't think I'll see it. Okay. So why are we here? Well, our plan today is to be able to define what proficiency-based learning is and to show the importance in these foundational literacy skills. So I've focused on the foundational skills. And then to be able to walk away with a lesson or a unit or even just an activity that has clear learning targets, high impact strategies, and a formative assessment that tells you, did this work? Did they learn anything? Did they learn what I wanted them to learn? That's the most important part. And being able to do that, that clear success criteria, when kids know what they need to know to be successful, like I have to be able to do this, then I have to be able to do that, then I have to be able to do this. And then I've mastered this standard, whatever language you want to use. That's part of Hattie's clear success criteria and that visible learning. That's a 0.77 impact. And if you're not familiar with John Hattie and his high impact instructional strategies and his metacognition and all of his meta research, basically he says in a typical year, a 0.4 impact will give you the typical year of learning. So anything above a 0.4 is going to accelerate the learning. And clear success criteria, or when kids know what success look like, it's explicit. You've told me exactly how I'm going to meet your expectations, is 0.77. So almost 2 years of learning can be achieved just by telling kids exactly what it looks like. And we use the standards to decide what it looks like. So what is proficiency-based learning? You will hear all sorts of different ways of saying this. People say, we're standards-based, we're proficiency-based, we're competency-based, we're project-based, right? There's so many ways of saying it. We're mastery learners. It it doesn't matter so much what your school decides to call it, as long as that everyone understands what it means and that you're clear on that language in your school and that you can share that with your students, with your teachers, with your parents, with your community. So proficiency-based learning focuses on mastering a specific skill. That skill is based around the standard. It emphasizes individual learning progression. So this eventually develops into you can give each child their own learning plan. Not right away, not today, but I can show you how to get there. And all of this work aligns directly with the state standards. So why is it important in early literacy? This is how we build the strong reading and writing foundations, and it ensures that students achieve their mastery before progressing. We talk a lot about reducing the cognitive load on kids and allowing them to learn in a stress-free environment. And when we give them clear intentions and they know what success is going to look like and how to achieve it, the success is the learning the learning is linear and clear. It happens almost naturally once everyone's clear about what needs to be happening. So aligning instruction to ELA really gives us measurable outcomes. That's the biggest thing. And Hattie calls this teacher clarity. Hattie talks a lot about when teachers know and understand what kids need to be able to know and understand, it's easier to design activities and practice and ultimately assessments that reflect what they are learning and why. And this increases engagement and retention. When students receive that consistent, focused instruction, we reduce those learning gaps and ultimately the confusion. I do have the current Montana ELA standards linked in this document, and it's linked throughout and it's listed as a resource because these are the current standards. I do want to mention that we have just completed, well, almost completed. We're going to the Board of Public Ed, but we're through the collaborative process, if you will, of the task force, the NRC, of revising the standards. And they don't look anything like what they currently look like. I will say that they are much more concise. And so when developing these tools, I do want you to keep in mind that these new standards will be rolling out. It will probably be 2027. That hasn't been completely decided. Right now it says 2026, but we believe it to be extended a little. And so I just want you to be aware of that before designing whole big projects and activities around these current standards, that the new standards will be coming out. All right. So designing a proficiency-based learning plan or a lesson plan or an understanding all of the parts and what proficiency is and how will I know if my student has reached it. So this video is probably the best way that I can explain what a proficiency scale is and how to utilize one. We're going to watch it for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to give you some time to reflect and think about what this means for your learning and moving forward. And then we're going to practice the tools and the strategies that she shares with us. I'm hoping you're going to be able to hear this video. If not, I'm going to put it in the chat and you can watch it on your own. So let me play it and let's see what happens. You got an overview of what proficiency scales are and what they are used for and what they are not used for. Quick poll, if you will, in the chat. Can you tell me if you've ever utilized a proficiency scale? No judgment, just seeing if I've got like a room full of people that use them every day, some people that have heard of them, not really, or nope, don't use them, not sure what they are. And that's okay. It's all okay, whatever it is. Yep, that's good. Thank you. Great. Yay. That's great to see. Okay, I'm excited. All right. So, I will say that usually when I do these types of presentations and ask these questions, people are like, no, and that's, that's just, it's okay, but it is an important step in this process that I think makes it easier to assess kids and how they're doing. Because you have to know if you're using an assessment that's actually assessing what they need to know and do. So that's what we're going to do right now. We are going to build a proficiency scale. So we are going to use the foundational kindergarten skill number 1, demonstrate an understanding of the organization and basic features of print. And then we have follow words, we have recognize that spoken words, understand words, recognize and name all of the alphabet, stand on your head, spin around. No. Okay. So how do we create one assessment question that has all of these components? That's really what we have to figure out, right? A true 3.0 or proficient question will ask every part of this standard. And what a proficiency scale does is it helps you to decide what all of those pieces are, so that when you think you have an assessment, you can take that proficiency scale and look at the assessment or activity. It can be a practice, it doesn't always have to be an assessment, but does it have all of the components of this standard so that I know that I am asking a proficient question? Now you do want to have, and that's a 3.0 question. You're going to hear me say that kind of stuff. So I'm just trying to clarify. You do want to have 2.0 questions which are part of the standard as well. Because if a child cannot answer the 3.0 question, I now need to know what part of the standard don't they get. A lot of times we know a kid can't answer this whole part, but what don't they know? Where is the disconnect? And that's where a proficiency scale changes the game, because it makes sure that you have all of those questions. And a 2.0 question is going to be your diagnosing piece. It is going to give you the here's what's happening. The child can follow words from left to right, top to bottom, and page by page. Okay. They can recognize spoken words are represented in a written language. But the child cannot understand that words are separated by spaces in print. For this standard, if a child cannot do that one part, they are now not proficient on the entire standard. So they are on a 2.0. But by breaking it down, I can now see that. I know exactly what I need to do to get that kiddo up, right? They need practice on understanding that that space is what's separating those words in print. So the first activity I always ask people to do when building a proficiency scale. Yeah, Joellen, yep. So not proficient, novice, same term. And people, I try to go with the 2.0, 1.0, 3.0 language just because that labeling, and it's so hard because a lot of districts have come up with their own, like some of them are like, you're an eagle, you're a blue jay, you're an eagle, you're a high, I don't know, all these different things. And that's fine. Everybody gets to do what you can, that's great. It's just as long as everyone at your school knows what that term means. So the first step is to really identify your nouns and verbs when building a proficiency scale. So I always bolded my verbs. Those are the skills. This is the things I need to make sure that they know how to do, right? And then my nouns, the content, were usually I did them in purple or italicized. I did both just so that you could really see them. So does anybody want to share what stands out for them when they look at this? Is anyone overwhelmed by this one standard?
The standard is overwhelming.
Yeah,
as are all the
foundationals. It's very full of color.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot. And kids have to be able to do every one of these things to be deemed proficient. And so developing an activity that gives them the opportunity to practice this in one go can be the challenge, right? Because did we ever really give them an opportunity to practice it at a proficient level? Or are we only offering 2.0 questions, 2.0 activities, 2.0 opportunities? Which would be that nearing proficient, usually on most, that's probably the most common term if you wanted to have that label. So then what does this actually look like? This is all of that work in a proficiency scale. So at the top here, I've got the standard. Okay, here it is. And here we keep it exactly word for word because as the teacher, I do need to know exactly what that standard says. Do kids need to know that? No. Do kindergartners need to know that? No. We need to put that into kid-friendly language, right? So I'm going to ignore the 4.0 and the 3.5 right now. I will come back to that. But the 3.0 is really the important part. Here is spelled out everything a kid needs to be able to know and do for this one standard currently. Okay, so this means you have to have activities that give them the opportunity to do every one of these things. So if I'm sitting down with a kiddo and I'm saying, show me how you read the words on a book, and they're showing me left to right, and they're showing me that they go from top to bottom, and they're showing me that they turn the page to follow the story, right? I've never asked them the rest of these questions in that same setting. Is this child proficient on this standard? I don't know. This would be an LOE, lack of evidence for me, right? Like, I don't have the evidence I need to answer that. How often do we do all of these things in the same assessment? And we need to give them at least 7 to 10 opportunities to practice this before it ever counts for anything. So we don't grade it. We don't grade practice. We just give feedback. But I need to have 2.0 questions on my assessment and 2.0 activities all day long. And teachers are usually really good at this part. This is where we're like, got it, my centers, yep, my stations, whatever we call them these days, right? Like, we have all of these things more in isolation, which is great. But in order to know which one of these things your kiddo needs to work on, you have to have that 3.0 question asking every part of it. And the proficiency scale gives you the tool to take maybe something that your curriculum says, hey, this is an assessment for foundational skill number 1. Use it. And instead of going, I will do that, you could take this proficiency scale and say, hold up, does it have every part of this in here? And nothing else. So it doesn't ask them to present, it doesn't ask them to write, it doesn't ask them to talk about anything else but these items. Because if you add anything else to it, it's a 4.0 question. Any standard, any other requirement, if you ask them to present this information, if you ask them to write, because nothing says that they have to write, right? You're automatically accelerating the standard, which sometimes we want to do that, right? But we got to make sure we got 3.0 questions and opportunities first, then the 2.0s, and then the 4.0s. You might say, why is this 3.5 on there? Because some schools like it. It is really hard to go from a 100-point scale to my personal preference is a 3-point scale. I don't even like the 4-point be on there because parents then want the 4. And the goal is not the 4, the goal is the 3. The 4 will come. When the 3 is there, the 4 just happens. Right? And so we don't even have to worry about it. But that's very hard for parents to understand. And so the 4 is there for parents and 3.5s are there for parents. Because it feels real hard to have that distinction after there was so much, opportunity in a 100-point scale, if you will. Joellen, the difficulty is interpretation of words like demonstrate, understand. Where was this woman on our standards revision task force? Yes. And I hope in the new standards, you will see that we were very intentional. The task force was very intentional in those verbs. And is this accessible? Is this something that I could take back and provide data to my kids, my parents, my community, that I'm teaching this and that the kids are learning this skill, this essential skill? Nice. Joellen keeps a spreadsheet of each component of the standard. Marzano talks about those critical capacities. So really knowing what each standard is really trying to get at and having that as kind of your label. So if it's, informational writing, narrative writing, those types of things, informational text, those, whatever it is, and then keeping your assessments down on this side, right? And crossing it off. Am I getting everything? And that's a great way. There's so, keeping track of all of this is maybe one of the biggest challenges, because when you find something, you're maybe not there right away. But the digital world makes it easier. I tracked everything by standard. I just had file folders, digital and hard copy, with the label of the standard on it, and that's where it went. And sometimes, things work for more than one standard, and so it went in 2 folders, but yeah. Okay, so the blue on the 2.0, what's this blue? Those are prerequisites. So these are what I might need to work on for a kiddo that's struggling to get any part of the standard. So where did these come from? The standard before, right? So that's always what we do. We go to the standard before and we look at what that requirement is. And so really taking it one step further back and saying, what could we do to get this to scaffold and get this kid on the same page for this standard? Does anybody want to share anything? The spreadsheet has each student on it for each component. Nice. So that's how you track how you've assessed each student on each standard. Look at you. We're not even there yet, Joellen. Of course you are. Mother time. I told you I had too much to say. Okay, we'll move on. Okay, so that activity was going to be to go in a breakout room, but I feel like which we could do if you want to, but I don't know if we have time. But what I want you to do is to think about assessments that you currently have in your curriculum and how a proficiency scale would help you define what really needs to be there. And I'm going to tell you that almost always there is going to be more on that assessment than what is in the standard. Which is good. You're like, what? There's so much in that standard. I know. And yet we say, let's put some more on there, right? And so there might be something critical from that standard missing in the assessment, or we just keep adding to it. And so it's okay to take an assessment from your curriculum and say, I'm going to use all of this except that. They're not going to do that, right? And kids love it. If you printed out the worksheet already and you say, get your pen out or your pencil, right? Kindergarten, I know, sorry, but 3rd grade, right? And cross this part out. You don't have to do it. They're like, yes, right? That's the best part of the assessment already. You've set them up for success. They're feeling great. It's okay to do that, but you have to know what to cut, right? And you have to be ready to defend that and talk about that, because sometimes people are like, wait, whoa, how come we're not doing that? It can become powerful when you start looking at what we call canned assessments and say, is this aligned to the standard that I'm trying to find information on? Especially big red flags on assessments are also when they'll say, this is aligned to this standard, this standard, this standard, this standard, this standard, this standard, this standard. They will. They'll have 8, 9 standards that you could use it for assessment. No, you're going to have to pick that one apart big time and add to it. But there might be components of it that'll be really helpful and useful. Right? So I'm not saying throw it all out. You just have to be intentional with what you use. Okay. So this next activity, we've reviewed a proficiency scale and how you might use one. I do want to say explicitly, we don't use proficiency scales to grade student work. Okay, so I'm going to say that one more time. We do not use proficiency scales to grade student work. It is to grade or to assess the activity, the task, the assessment question that you're looking at. When we come to assessing the child's work, we can use a rubric, right? And we can use that proficiency scale to build the rubric. And should it be aligned? Absolutely. But rubrics bring in different components, and we can talk more about that if that's interesting to people. But proficiency scales are used to determine if the task is meeting the expectation of the standard. Okay, I've got 3 lesson plan templates on this slide, and I'll put them all into the chat. One is super detailed, has lots of questions, lots of guiding questions, lots of area for cross-curricular opportunities. The second one is like 3 boxes of basically aligning it to the standard, right? And then the third one is the diamonds of alignment. If you've ever heard that, it's a very common term in lesson planning of just thinking of the different ways you can group kids and matching that to instructional strategies. You don't have to use one of these, but sometimes people are looking for a new standards aligned lesson plan. Because if you're using a lesson plan that does not ask you to think about coming back to the standard every time you're choosing something, I'd ask you to reflect on if that's really supporting your work. Because we need to be pushed, right? We need to be remembering what the ultimate goal is. And so having a lesson plan that supports that can be really helpful. So these are here. I was going to give you some time to fill them in and then get into breakout rooms to collaborate and share. So how about if I give you about 10 minutes to view those and see what your question, well, should I do 5 minutes to view them and then they can get in breakout rooms to discuss? Okay, let's do 5 minutes to view. We'll come back at 4:45 and we'll put you in breakout rooms to kind of talk about how you might use these different lesson plans.
Are you dropping the links to those lesson plan templates in?
You gotta love learning a new platform like at the last minute. Anyways, we only have about 5 minutes left, and I really thought that we would be able to get into the next activity, which was taking that proficiency scale and then aligning it to activities that have high impact strategies. Slide deck out to everybody, right? So they have
Yeah,
all the
I will.
resources, but I can put
Mhm.
it in the chat too.
Yeah, I usually post a PDF of the slide deck, which still has links that are live.
Perfect. Beautiful. So I guess I just want to ask, like, what did you discuss? What came up? What questions do you have? For some of you, this was brand new information. Others said you use this. Yeah. Does anybody want to feel brave and want to share?
Could you explain the difference between a rubric and a proficiency scale? That was one thing that came up, and I don't know it through and through like you do to respond to that
Yeah.
well. Because I was like, it's hard for me to even to explain.
So rubrics are really usually to come in with a body of work. So we usually use a rubric when we're going to go, okay, it's the end of this writing unit on narrative writing, and I'm going to determine if they're proficient. Because we know that writing is a really good place to use rubrics, okay? We know that writing is not a one and done, right? We don't come and just write a narrative piece and never look at it again and it's beautiful and perfect. And so to model that writing process, we want them to go through the editing phase where our language standards are. We may want them to present their information to practice their speaking and listening standards. And so that is where we can add to the standard, the narrative writing standard. We could add, okay, this is also, spelled correctly, used sensory details to describe the feelings. I don't know. I'm kind of going off the fly here, but then also, presented this, used eye contact and correct tone of voice. Now I've got lots of standards, right? But on that rubric, I would still have RF1, and I could mark them proficient, I'm sorry, the writing standard. We're on the writing standard. So the writing standard, I think 3 is narrative writing. And I can mark them proficient because I've done all my writing. I've got examples that they've done the writing. But now I also want to talk about they edited their paper, they presented their paper, maybe they did peer feedback, and I want that whole package there. And I can have that on a rubric that clearly defines all those different components. And I can say, now I know this child is proficient. Because even on a rubric, I could say, this kid's a writer, right? Proficient. This kid is not an editor, maybe not a speller, maybe not and I can put that on a rubric. And it doesn't take away that they've done a great job with their writing. And a lot of great writers maybe aren't great presenters. So I can put that on a rubric. And it still shows that learning happened. That learning is there. And I'm not taking away from it. But rubrics have a lot more to them, and they're really to analyze a body of work. Does that help? Any other questions before we wrap it up? All right, I want to thank you so much for indulging me. 4 o'clock on a Monday. It's hot. It's warm here. 74 now. Oh, it's Wednesday. Sorry. It feels like it's a Wednesday that feels like a Monday.
You said it twice, so it must.
Really does. Really does. I think it's because all our other PDs have been on Mondays, so I'm just like, it's Monday. Yeah.
The feedback form is in the chat. Next week, we will tackle sound walls. And that will definitely be applicable to any grade, including early literacy classroom. I'm far enough out of my learning in proficiency-based that I can tell you that this is applicable too, but you may not be in a place where you're ready to take it. But like I said in the breakout room that I was in, if you can latch on to the verbs and the nouns activity, that really was the first biggest thing that helped me understand standards and then apply that to instruction and assessment. Survey's not here.